Welcome to Meet the Candidates. The Frankfort Plant Board is giving us a chance to talk with the various candidates for office in this community of ours, and I think it behooves any of us to take an interest in what they have to say and what they would like to do in this office. We're really excited that at this particular edition, we're talking with Jim Sewell, and he's going to tell us what his general position is within the county and what he's been able to do lately, and why he's willing to assume the responsibility of this major undertaking. And Jim, welcome. And most people here already know you, I understand that. But we do have a lot of people that are moving into the community and maybe going in to do that little voting thing, and they'd like to know who the candidates are. So for PVA, we're talking, what have you done to get to this position, and why do you want to assume the responsibility?
Well, I have been in the real estate business for going on 44 years, and all of that time was spent here in Frankfort. And I moved here 50 years ago this year to Frankfort when I came right out of college, and I love Frankfort. I think it's a wonderful place, and this is an office that I've had my eye on for quite some time, and you know, it's a property valuation task, and that's what I do. That's what I've done for 44 years, basically. And I had a real estate office. Actually, was a partner in a couple of other offices, and actually haven't really sold a house in 15 years, but I've been mostly appraisal work, which is valuation.
Well, property valuation administrator sort of speaks for itself. That is a definition of the office. But I find that a lot of people think that there are some issues with it. It doesn't always go as smoothly as they think it should be. What do you see as being some of the issues with that office? And do you have any particular ideas of how you might address those issues?
Well, I'm excited about taking on the task of becoming the PVA for Franklin County. And it's property valuation is all about information. And a lot of what the PVA does is guided by statute and regulation. And it's I would like to see more information gathered, if possible, and that would, in large part, depend upon the funding and the staff availability. The staff now, I think, does a wonderful job. I've been in and out of that office for 44 years, and I think they do a wonderful job. But there's more information that,
such as.
Well, like on the property cards, they generally don't put planning and zoning or zoning designations on there. And there are appraisers from all over the state who come into Frankfort. And if they're looking at property in Franklin County, then they're going to go to the PVA office and dig for information. And I would like to see as much information available to them as possible. And same way with the real estate brokers and agents and appraisers. Anybody involved in the real estate industry is going to eventually wind up in the PVA office for one reason or another.
Now, for the individual property owner, are there any concerns that you think you could address to make them more comfortable? How do you go about a uniform assessment of property, changes in assessment, establishing a tax base, that sort of thing? Do you have any suggestions for improving some of those areas?
Well, the tax base is set by fiscal court and the city commission. It depends on whether you live in the county or the city. our job is to place a value on the property for assessment purposes, and it's guided somewhat by the Department of Revenue. They have a standard by which you must abide, and you have a range, and you must fit on each property within that range. So it's it's a lot of regulation combined with information that you get from the market, and that's each subdivision is different, each location is different. There's some locations are similar to others, and they may be on the east side of Frankfort or on the west side of Frankfort. You may have similarities in properties that sell, and that's what sets the value. So it would be my goal to gather the necessary information to put a fair assessment on each property.
I am a total blank about how the PVA's office functions. How do you go about gathering that kind of information? Where do you look for it? How do you manage to see differences in what it is as opposed to what it should be, that sort of thing? I'm just totally blank on that.
Well, the sales of property set what the market, it tells you what the market's doing, and you try to assess or appraise properties at whatever the fair market value is, and the fair market value is the price that a ready, willing, and able buyer will pay to a ready, willing, and able seller, both of whom are well enough informed about what they're getting into, and then they strike a price on the property, and when it sells, that basically sets the value on that property. And it's sometimes very difficult to place a value on a particularly an unusual property, but it's all about information and gathering information on sales of other properties and what property sells for per square foot. And
how would you change the gathering of that information? What steps would you take to improve the quality or quantity of information that you're dealing with?
Well, I would have to look at how their information is gathered, and it's something I've done for 44 years, and compare their methods to mine, and probably find some sort of happy medium, because some of what they do, I'm sure, is set by their standards that are put down by the state, by the revenue cabinet.
Are there any instances where you feel you should appeal to the state to have changed, or are there any changes, in other words, that you think need to be implemented in this office?
As far as the property valuation, I don't know. I don't see any changes coming there. It's more about how you gather information and the amount of information that you can gather, and about staff time allotment. And if you're looking at the budget, if there's not enough money there for the staffing to gather additional information, and obviously you can't do it.
So have you had an opportunity to look over the budget for that office to see if that would be feasible?
I have seen a synopsis of the budget, but there's some details that I was not privy to from the information that I got, which came from the revenue cabinet. I think the budget's like $702,000 or $703,000 a year, and there's some allocations that I was not able to discern from the information that was given me. So I'd have to get in and take a a closer look at it.
Right. As I said, I feel like I'm looking at it totally fresh. I have no preconceived notions of how they go about performing those duties. So I didn't know if there was something we needed as citizens to be looking at for a change, or if there are future developments that we need to be asking for.
Well, their regulations dictate that they actually physically inspect each property in the county every so often. There's a time period, I think maybe every 5 years or whatever the time period is. They are required to actually go out and look at the property, and they measure it. And I have found that from time to time my measurements don't match theirs, and that's gets into square footage, which is sort of the language of property valuation. That's very important.
What would account for differences?
There are all kinds of reasons that measurements can be different. How you take them. If I take a tape measure that is done in tenths of feet, and I also use a laser measure to do shorter distances that are mostly inside, and we have standards that we have to abide by on that, particularly when you've got a multi-story house and the upstairs may be smaller than the downstairs, with odd-shaped walls and slope ceilings, and it depends on how you measure and how you follow the standards. There are also minute differences that can come about if a tape measure, if you've got two people with a tape measure, if they don't stretch it all the way out, you may get 2 or 3 tenths of a foot, which, in a big house can make a difference if you do that a number of times.
You said that they're required to do that on a 5-year rotating basis. Are we up to date on that, or do you know?
I'm not positive about the time, but I do know that there is a time period within which they have to inspect each property in the county. And I'm assuming we're up to date, but again, I'm not in the middle of it, so I'm not positive.
Well, with your experience in real estate, do you think, for example, that the current tax rolls of property assessment are as accurate as they should be, or does that need to be readdressed, or where do we stand with bringing in as many as appropriate tax dollars for property?
Well, we have to fall within the state guidelines on
right,
on
but
valuation,
have we updated those?
I assume we have,
Okay.
but I very often see that a property may be assessed lower or higher than the value that I put on it. But an appraisal is a matter of opinion. Your opinion.
Well, now, that's what I was wondering about. Was as opposed to a matter of opinion, is it totally based on the latest buying price, or is it fluctuating?
Each property that sells is reassessed at that sale price, and it may not change for it could be 5 years if that's the time period within which they go back and actually inspect the property and then reevaluate.
Now, on private property like that, would a private property owner need to expect a reappraisal of their property periodically, or will that wait until it sells again?
No, they should expect a reassessment of it periodically.
Whatever that time frame might be. Yeah.
Well, at least that often, yes.
Do you anticipate, I think I asked you, do you anticipate making changes in staffing, procedures, funding, any of that?
I don't personally know what the procedures are with the current PVA or actually the past PVA. I'd have to get in there and determine that myself. The staffing adequacy, I feel like it's not funded well enough. But I think the people they have are doing a fine job. I mean, they've always been very cooperative with me and very knowledgeable. And every time I walk in that office, they're busy. They're working.
And you alluded to the fact that it is state controlled. Is that a state funding issue, or is it?
Yes, it's funded by the state, yeah.
So that would not be something you would be addressing as PVA of funding for that
would.
office?
Surely it would.
You would? What would you be telling the state about that office?
I would be looking at my budget and saying either I've got too much and the taxpayers are getting cheated, or I don't have enough to give them the information that I think they need. Another issue that has always kind of bugged me is the fact that taxpayers pay for information on the internet that is provided by tax dollars. I think it ought to be free to everybody. I mean, because it's gathered by people who are paid by the taxpayers. And I think that should be available it is available if you want to go down to the office, but they have a website, and I think that should be free to everybody, but it's not.
Who would you talk to about getting that changed?
I would say that probably the legislature would have to change it, which might be a difficult thing to do, because it is a method of resource for the PVA office. And if it's underfunded, then they're making money from the sale of their information. So it could be a necessary evil. But if there's enough money to do an adequate job so that the taxpayers are guaranteed that they're getting their money's worth, then they're in good shape.
As I have told you several times already in this conversation, I know so little about the PVA's office that I'm not sure exactly which questions to ask you. So are there any other issues you feel you need to take to our viewers?
Not really. It's just that I'm excited about the opportunity to serve my community. I've made this my home for 50 years, more or less, and
well, then that's the camera to look at.
Well,
tell our voters why you're the best candidate and why they should vote for you.
Well, I think that this is something I've done for 40 some odd years, and it's something I've enjoyed. It's been an industry that's been kind to me, and I just hope that I could serve a community that I really am enamored with. I love this community. I think it's a wonderful, vibrant city, and I hope I can serve it.
I really thank you for taking the time to come in and talk to us about this today.
Thank you for having me.
And we look forward to seeing you again. I'd like to remind our viewers to stay tuned to news about the Candidates Forum, which will be April 26th. So keep an eye out for all the details with that, and be sure and participate if you possibly can. Submit some questions if you have any, and then by all means join us on the May the 22nd for the election returns. We're going to try to get down to the clerk's office and bring you the vote totals just as soon as they're available to us. And don't forget to come back right here for more Meet the Candidates.